All right, hello people. How are we? Doing a little bit of small talk, giving people an opportunity to show up before I jump into this, because today is one of those lessons where you have a learning activity somewhere around like the halfway mark. Everybody good? We enjoyed our holiday, our little siesta from class. Was that good for everybody? It was great for me. Is this a silent crew? Okay, no small talk. I'll jump right in then. Say less. Okay, let me share my screen. That was a very failed attempt at small talk and checking in. Oh, at the top of class, there was something I had to remind everybody about. November 5th or 3rd is the last day to drop classes without penalty. Yeah. So last day to withdraw from classes is November 5th or 3rd. It's one of those days. So if you are considering dropping this or any class for that matter, that is a very important deadline for you. I'm not 100% certain how that happens, but I imagine it involves speaking to your advisor and the registrar's office, because those are things that are very normal about that process. All right. Oh, and you also are supposed to check in with your professor to see if like that's okay, check in where you are, and make sure, see if there's an opportunity for some sort of like recovery or recourse for you before you jump the gun and go ahead and withdraw from a class, because you may have an opportunity for redemption, and paying for the class again is not fun if you are on scholarship, or even if you're not. If you paid it out of pocket, nobody wants to pay for a class twice. So have the conversations with the powers that be, and that I think that last day is either November 3rd or November 5th. Either way, double check your calendar. That is a very important date. So during this week, a lot of your counterparts are having midterm assessments. As I mentioned, we don't have one this week. Okay, that's a lot. We don't have one this week. However, we will have one after chapter 4. So, and that test will be on chapters 2, 3, and 4. We did 2 last week. We're jumping into 3 this week. Last week, I asked you to go ahead and read ahead for this chapter because we only have this week to spend on it, as we were taking some time to catch up with your class counterparts, and we are finally caught up. So next week is chapter 4. We won't have a lot of time to spend on this, which is also why I've chosen to use this chapter as an opportunity to for you to do a learning activity. Much like last chapter, there are very integral biology opportunities in here because it talks a little bit about the 5 senses. This chapter is connected to the last one where we talked about, our nervous system and how the body communicates with itself, how the brain and the spine communicates. The central nervous system, the brain and the spine connects with the peripheral nervous system, which is essentially the rest of your body. This chapter talks a little bit about like your 5, 6, 7 senses, how our senses contribute to the process of receiving information from the outside world through energy, and then perception, which is like how our brain goes ahead and interprets what it is that we have received. Yes, it was absolutely a responsibility to go ahead and read ahead with this chapter because we are all grown-esque, grown adjacent. And that's kind of like how college works. And I prompted last week, as in like, you read the chapter because your brain has something to stick to. And as I mentioned, there are very strong biology foundations there are strong biology foundations in this chapter itself. So, which is why I want you to do a bit of a learning activity just to kind of like reinforce those concepts, because we talk about like the eyes and the ears from a very biological perspective. So that being said, I'm actually going to jump right in. The introductory part of this lesson involves a video that talks about the difference between sensory and perception. And then the bulk of this lecture, or the bulk of the slides, I actually have videos that are in there for you guys, but they are not a part of like this lecture. They are supporting materials for your learning activity. This time, I think I'm only going to put you in, I want to say 3 groups, but that feels like a really, really bad idea. So I'm going to process that as I say it out loud. Maybe I'll put you in 6 groups and just make your groups smaller. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll put you in 6 groups and make your groups a lot smaller. So that being said, jumping right into the lecture. And as I indicated, there's a learning activity. So we'll walk through the learning activity for this lesson. Again, it involves breaking you guys essentially into groups, and you have a deliverable that will be taken as one of your written assignment grades, because again, we're still trying to make up for some of the activities that you had previously. And this is a really good opportunity for you to do that. All right, I'm now sharing my screen. And not that, not that, not that. Here we go. This is not what I wanted to show you. Also no. Don't look in my folder. All right, so this is our course landing page. Ooh, wait, I was supposed to change my outfit. I'll do that later. Course landing page, of course, we're here with our Zoom. This is going to be your grading rubric for the activity that you will do for class in your 6 groups. This is the course lecture slide for this week. I've already put it up. Just a heads up. Okay, so our learning objectives. And again, these are especially important for you this week, because remember, identifying learning objectives within your assignments is a part of the task. It's something that you actually get a grade for. And with the last group learning activity, it's the area in which most of you lost points because you didn't identify where the objectives actually applied. You just kind of like put the information in there. All right, objectives. Describe how energy is converted into messages to the brain. Explain the difference between absolute and difference thresholds and the effect of adaptation on sensory thresholds. Describe the parts of the eye. Describe the parts of the eye. So if your group is going to be doing the assignment on the eye, when we talk about objectives, when something says describe the parts of the eye, that is something that, like, when you put information into your work, I need to see that you have described the parts of the eye. Explain the causes of after images, how dark and light adaptation explains your vision. Distinguish among hue, saturation, brightness, additive, subtractive color mixing. These are all parts of the eye. Explain the characteristics of sound waves and their effect and sensation on what we call sound. That is for a section if you were doing anything on hearing. That is important to you. That is one of the learning objectives. Describe the path of information sound travels from the ears to the brain. That is very important to you if you are doing the section on hearing. Explain place theory, frequency theory, and Volley principle. Discuss damage to the sense of hearing. That also applies to you. Describe olfactory system and the ways stimuli give rise to smells. If you are doing the section on smelling and tasting, this applies to you. Describe how stimuli give rise to taste. Distinguish between kinesthetic and vestibular senses. Explain how sensory messages are sent from the skin to the brain. We've just kind of like generally cover all of this, we'll generally cover this. Summarize the sources of differences amongst people and degree of pain and experience. I haven't assigned the skin to any group, so you won't have to worry about that one. Explain gate control, biosocial theories of pain and way various pain treatments work. Distinguish between sensation and perception. Explain Gestalt principles of perception organization. And then describe the several perceptual consistencies, identify major cues to distance, depth, distinguishing between monocular and binocular cues, explain how we perceive movement, distinguishing between real movement and apparent movement, explain how visual illusions rise, and describe how observer characteristics and culture can influence perception. All right. So during this lecture, we're not going to cover all of these objectives, but you should have covered them in depth because you have already done what? Read this chapter, because that's what you were supposed to do. Okay. So as I indicated before, there's a difference between sensation and perception. And that's kind of like saying there's a difference between what actually happened and there's and how your body perceives it. And that's exactly what's happening here. So sensation is actually the experience of some sort of sensory stimulation, and perception is how your brain interprets that. This distinguishes for the difference between things like how highly seasoned food may be for some people versus others. This is an experience that we've had. Things like how hot. I know there have been arguments between like men and women versus over like how hot water is. This is one of those perception conversations. So it's like the water is this temperature, but I perceive it to be this, you perceive it to be that. So that's the difference. That's the distinction between these concepts. And needless to say, we know things like culture can contribute to concepts like this. For example, if you were raised eating spicy food, your threshold or your perception of what is considered hot or spicy or pepper, as we say, is going to be altered. It's going to be different from a person who didn't grow up eating spicy food. So the difference between sensation and perception. All right. And in like every chapter, we talk about these enduring issues. A person versus a situation. To what extent do our perceptual experiences actually reflect the outside world? I know there's a saying that's like, perception is reality, but there's an alternate saying, which is that feelings aren't facts. So just because you feel a thing, or you can articulate that you have felt a thing, is that you need to be able to distinguish between like, did this happen, or did I think, or is this how my body interpreted it? And that, and perception involves a melee of senses and your own context and your own experiences in order for you to draw a conclusion. And again, particularly if you're an educator, this is something that we must always be aware of, because like, just because you taught a thing from your perspective doesn't mean that everybody received the thing that you deliver, all right? Something to bear in mind. So mind versus body. In what ways do our experiences depend on our biological processes? So like how does a person with like no hearing or limited hearing, how do they perceive the world versus a person who has like their full hearing capacity? The difference between like, how does a person who cannot see well or doesn't see, how do they interpret the world versus a person who has like their full faculties? I know when I take off my glasses, it's lights out. I don't know what's happening in the world. I feel like I can't even hear when my glasses are off, but that's just me. Diversity versus universal. I will never say this word right the first time. Universality. I'm gonna get it. The syllables are just difficult. All right, so to what extent do people around the world perceive events in the same way? There's a very funny running joke that says like, and it's a bit of a social media meme, and it's one of those things is like, if a Black person is sitting down and they see Black people running, they also start running. So like, in what ways do humans across spaces interpret things in the very same way? All right. There are some people, like if they hear something happening outside, some people will look out the window, some people will sit down and mind their business. If there is a crisis, there are some people who are automatically primed to respond to the situation. There are people who are primed to intervene in the situation, and then there are people who are primed to mind their own business. So to what extent does like your perception and your experiences determine how you respond to stimuli or a sensation, or how you perceive something to be? And then stability versus change, nature versus nurture, you know, our friends. How does our experience of the outside world change as a result of the experiences over the course of our lives? I was listening to and again, I don't mean to bring race into this, it just happens to be a really great example. I was listening to a podcast lately, and it's one of those kind of like advice-esque podcasts. And someone called in and asked, like, how do they make friends in the outside world when their partner won't allow like white people in their house? And the question was like, what kinds of experiences did this person have with someone from another race that made them make such a hard and fast stance against like, all these people are not welcome in my space, or I feel incredibly unsafe around a very specific group of people? So like, how does your individual experience, how is that shaped by what is happening in the world outside of you? So it goes to like how you are perceived by the world and how the world responds to you and how you choose to respond to that in kind. And that happens at multiple levels. I'm working with a group who is designing a program for gender-based violence. And a part of the conversation is like, how do women act knowing that they have to constantly protect themselves? So it's like, how do you perceive? I know, like, if I'm walking and I see a shadow, I automatically like brace myself because I feel like I need to protect myself. And that's just as a woman who is living in this world, I know the dangers that exist in the world, and men are sometimes extremely oblivious to the same threats that women have. So like, how do your personal experiences, how are they influenced by what's happening in the world? All right, as I indicated, there are very biological base fundamental parts of this lesson. We're going to start off with this video on sensation and perception, just to kind of like heighten our conversation on what I established is like the difference between like what is actually happening, the actual senses and energies that are triggered and your body receives versus like how your brain goes ahead and interprets them. So we'll just do this really quick crash course on sensory and perception. And I will try to make it big. Please don't start from the beginning. And play.
Let me tell you about Oliver Sacks, a famous physician, professor, and author of unusual neurological case studies. We'll be looking at some of his fascinating research in future lessons, but for now, I just want to talk about Sacks himself. Although he possesses a brilliant and inquisitive mind, Dr. Sacks cannot do a simple thing that your average toddler can. He can't recognize his own face in the mirror. Sacks has a form of prosopagnosia, a neurological disorder that impairs a person's ability to perceive or recognize faces, also known as face blindness. Last week, we talked about how brain function is localized, and this is another peculiarly excellent example of that. Sacks can recognize his coffee cup on the shelf, but he can't pick out his oldest friend from a crowd because the specific sliver of his brain responsible for facial recognition is malfunctioning. There's nothing wrong with his vision. The sense is intact. The problem is with his perception, at least when it comes to recognizing faces. Prosopagnosia is a good example of how sensing and perceiving are connected but different. Sensation is the bottom-up process by which our senses like vision, hearing, and smell receive and relay outside stimuli. Perception, on the other hand, is the top-down way that our brains organize and interpret that information and put it into context. So right now, at this very moment, you're probably receiving light from your screen through your eyes, which will send the data of that sensation to your brain. Perception, meanwhile, is your brain telling you that what you're seeing is a diagram explaining the difference between sensation and perception, which is pretty meta. Now, Now, your brain is interpreting that light as a talking person, whom your brain might additionally recognize as Hank. We are constantly bombarded by stimuli, even though we're only aware of what our own senses can pick up. Like, I can see and hear and feel and even smell this corgi, but I can't hunt using sonar like a bat, or hear a mole tunneling underground like an owl, or see ultraviolet and infrared light like a mantis shrimp. Probably can't even smell half of what you can smell. No. We have different senses. Yeah, there's a lot to sense in the world, and not everybody needs to sense all the same stuff. So every animal has its limitations, which we can talk about more precisely if we define the absolute threshold of sensation, the minimum stimulation needed to register a particular stimulus 50% of the time. So if I play a tiny little beep in your ear, and you tell me that you hear it 50% of the times that I play it, that's your absolute threshold of sensation. We have to use a percentage because sometimes I'll play the beep and you'll hear it, and sometimes you won't, even though it's the exact same volume. Why? Because brains are complicated. Detecting a weak sensory signal like that beep in daily life isn't only about the strength of the stimulus. It's also about your psychological state, your alertness and expectations in the moment. This has to do with signal detection theory, a model for predicting how and when a person will detect a weak stimuli, partly based on context. Exhausted new parents might hear their baby's tiniest whimper, but not even register the bellow of a passing train. Their paranoid parent brains are so trained on their baby, it gives their senses a sort of boosted ability, but only in relation to the subject of their attention. Conversely, if you're experiencing constant stimulation, your senses will adjust in a process called sensory adaptation. It's the reason that I have to check and see if my wallet is there if it's in my right pocket, but if I move it to my left pocket, it feels like a big uncomfortable lump. It's also useful to be able to talk about our ability to detect the difference between two stimuli. I might go out at night and look up at the sky, and well, I know with my objective science brain that no two stars have the exact same brightness. And yeah, I can tell with my eyeballs that some stars are brighter than others, but other stars that just look exactly the same to me. I can't tell the difference in their brightness. Are you done? Is it time for you to go? Give me a yeah, yes. Okay. Good girl. The point at which one can tell the difference is the difference threshold, but it's not linear. Like, if a tiny star is just a tiny bit brighter than another tiny star, I can tell. But if a big star is that same tiny amount brighter than another big star, I won't be able to tell the difference. This is important enough that we gave the guy who discovered it a law. Weber's law says that we perceive differences on a logarithmic, not linear scale. It's not the amount of change, it's the percentage change that matters. All right, how about now we take a more in-depth look at how one of our most powerful senses works. Vision. Your ability to see your face in the mirror is the result of a long but lightning quick sequence of events. Light bounces off your face and then off the mirror and then into your eyes, which take in all that varied energy and transforms it into neural messages that your brain processes and organizes into what you actually see, which is your face. Or if you're looking elsewhere, maybe you see a coffee cup or a corgi or a scary clown holding a tiny green pie. So how do we transform light waves into meaningful information? Well, let's start with the light itself. What we humans see as light is only a small fraction of the full spectrum of electromagnetic radiation that ranges from gamma to radio waves. Now, light has all kinds of fascinating characteristics that determine how we sense it. But for the purposes of this topic, we'll understand light as traveling in waves. The wave's wavelength and frequency determines their hue, and their amplitude determines their intensity or brightness. For instance, a short wave has a high frequency. Our eyes register short with high frequencies as bluish colors, while we see long, low frequency wavelengths as reddish hues. The way we register the brightness of a color, the contrast between the orange of a sherbet and the orange of a construction cone, has to do with the intensity or amount of energy in a given light wave, which, as we just said, is determined by its amplitude. Greater amplitude means higher intensity, means brighter color. Someone just told me that sherbet isn't a word that exists. His name is Michael Aranda, and he's a dumbhead. Did you type it into the dictionary? Type it into Google. Ask Google about sherbet. So sherbet is a thing. So after taking in this light through the cornea and the pupil, it hits the transparent disc behind the pupil, the lens, which focuses the light rays into specific images. And just as you'd expect the lens to do, it projects these images onto the retina, the inner surface of the eyeball that contains all the receptor cells that begin sensing that visual information. Now, your retinas don't receive a full image like a movie being projected onto a screen. It's more like a bunch of pixel points of light energy that millions of receptors translate into neural impulses and zip back into the brain. These retinal receptors are called rods and cones. Our rods detect grayscale and are used in our peripheral vision, as well as to avoid stubbing our toes in twilight conditions when we can't really see in color. Our cones detect fine detail and color. Concentrated near the retina's central focal point called the fovea, cones function only in well-lit conditions, allowing you to appreciate the intricacies of your grandma's china pattern or your uncle's sleeve tattoo. And the human eye is terrific at seeing color. Our difference threshold for colors is so exceptional that the average person can distinguish a million different hues. There's a good deal of ongoing research around exactly how our color vision works, but two theories help explain some of what we know. One model, called the Young-Helmholtz trichromatic theory, suggests that the retina houses three specific color receptor cones that register red, green, and blue, and when stimulated together, their combined power allows the eye to register any color. Unless, of course, you're colorblind. About 1 in 50 people have some level of color vision deficiency. They're mostly dudes because the genetic defect is sex-linked. If you can't see the Crash Course logo pop out at you in this figure, it's likely that your red or green cones are missing or malfunctioning, which means that you have dichromatic instead of trichromatic vision and can't distinguish between shades of red and green. The other model for color vision, known as the opponent process theory, suggests that we see color through processes that actually work against each other. So some receptor cells might be stimulated by red, but inhibited by green, while others do the opposite, and those combinations allow us to register colors. But back to your eyeballs. When stimulated, the rods and cones trigger chemical changes that spark neural signals, which in turn activate the cells behind them, called bipolar cells, whose job it is to turn on the neighboring ganglion cells. The long axon tails of these ganglions braid together to form the ropey optic nerve, which is what carries the neural impulses from the eyeball to the brain. That visual information then slips through a chain of progressively complex levels as it travels from optic nerve to the thalamus and onto the brain's visual cortex. The visual cortex sits at the back of the brain in the occipital lobe, where the right cortex processes input from the left eye and vice versa. This cortex has specialized nerve cells called feature detectors that respond to specific features like shapes, angles, and movements. In other words, different parts of your visual cortex are responsible for identifying different aspects of things. A person who can't recognize human faces may have no trouble picking out their set of keys from a pile on the counter. That's because the brain's object perception occurs in a different place from its face perception. In the case of Dr. Sachs, his condition affects the region of the brain called the fusiform gyrus, which activates in response to seeing faces. Sachs's face blindness is congenital, but it may also be acquired through disease or injury to that same region of the brain. And some cells in a region may respond to just one type of stimulus, like posture or movement or facial expression, while other clusters of cells weave all that separate information together in an instant analysis of a situation. That clown is frowning and running at me with a tiny cream pie. I'm putting these factors together. Maybe I should get out of here. This ability to process and analyze many separate aspects of the situation at once is called parallel processing. In the case of visual processing, this means that the brain simultaneously works on making sense of form, depth, motion, and color. And this is where we enter the whole world of perception, which gets complicated quickly and can even get downright philosophical. So we'll be exploring that in depth next time. But for now, if you were paying attention, you learn the difference between sensation and perception, the different thresholds that limit our senses, and some of the neurology and biology and psychology of human vision. Thanks for watching this lesson with your eyeballs, and thanks to our generous co-sponsors who made this episode possible. Alberto Costa, Altna Agrawal, PhD.
All right, shout out to all those people. Sorry, we don't have a lot of time to acknowledge them. Where's my, I can't find, go back. Sorry, I'm literally trying to find my, there we go. No. Sorry. I'm trying to make you see me again. Because that part of the screen disappeared and now I cannot get it back. I'm really annoyed at how stupid Google tries to make me. There we go. Start video. Haha, I am there. Excellent. All right. So again, sensory and perception, super, super complicated, and long and short. Energy happens outside of the world. Your body detects it through your sensors in your eyes, your ears, your nose, your skin. The brain has very specific parts of it that interprets everything.
Let me tell you about Oliver Sacks, a famous physician.
No, stop. All right. So, remember when I was telling you about like being able to multitask, things that are like high functioning, and so you can only do like simple tasks and complex tasks? I want you to take this into consideration, because like sometimes we are doing things and we think we're only doing one thing, but your body is engaging in multiple processes. So this is very important for your level of engagement. All right. So when you are doing tasks, it is important that you are not doing like multi-high function tasks at the same time. And it might be why you set yourself up for failure, because your brain, you're charging your brain with entirely too much when you think that there are actually simple tasks at hand. So as I mentioned, receptor cells receives what the world is sending out to your body, and through transduction that is translated into something that your body can interpret and design some sort of response. So the doctrine of specific nerve energies just means that there is a very specific part of your body and or brain that has a task of interpreting a very specific experience. As we saw with the video, something is responsible for detecting sound, a very specific sound. Something is responsible for detecting like a very specific type of movement. I had an incredible example for this. Oh, for example, the part of your body that knows how to appropriately respond to a song that hits your soul. You know, like when you hear music and it hits you in a way that you end up getting goosebumps, that's the doctrine of specific nerve energies. There's a part of your body that knows exactly how to trigger itself when you feel a thing. That's the doctrine of specific nerve energies. Like how does your body know how you feel on the inside to make this thing happen on the outside? How does your body know that seeing a specific thing, or like seeing somebody break down and cry, like you're at a funeral and you don't really know the person, but you see a relative of theirs that you might know, you see them break down and cry. How does your body know that that triggers a degree of sorrow in you that makes you cry? So that's the doctrine of very specific nerve endings. Does that resonate with anybody? Okay, it's a quiet day. Cool. All right. So sensory thresholds, we talked about this a little bit. So in a world, there's always going to be some sort of absolute or difference or relative. So your sensory thresholds, I just have a listing of like what those absolute thresholds are. So hearing, the tick of a watch from 6 meters away or 20 feet away in very quiet conditions. Like that's the best, quote unquote, that you should be able to hear, or you would be able to hear. A candle flame seen from 30 miles on a clear, dark night. You might see that spark in a distance. Taste, 1 gram of table salt on your tongue in 5 gallons of water. Like that's the minimal threshold. Smell, a drop of perfume diffused throughout a 3-room apartment. You spray it, boom, you can smell it all through the house. And touch, the wing of a bee falling onto a cheek from one height, from like 0.39 inches. You know, like sometimes you're walking and a random thing, you feel it on your, these are sensory thresholds. So these are things that you can feel at like their maximum distance. We talked about Weber's law. There's a difference in the threshold, or that threshold of perception, and that exists on some sort of percentage scale and not on an absolute scale. So just because something is a little bigger or a little louder, it doesn't mean that you will perceive it to be different from another. Like if you see 2 flashlights flashing from differences, or one has a higher bulb wattage than another, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will interpret some sort of difference. There are other variables that exist to help you interpret the difference between the two. All right, so subliminal perception, I just thought this was a really good topic, and I wanted to introduce it from kind of like a perspective that you know, which is marketing a little bit. So the concept of absolute thresholds implies that events occur below a level of awareness. So sometimes, so we talked about that 1 gram of salt in, I think it was like 500 liters of water, but like, what if it was less than 1 gram? How does your body interpret that? Okay, it implies the possibility of presenting stimuli subliminally, which means just like below your level of detection. And they have seen results in isolated settings, like in a lab. So I have another video for you. This one's from just like a professor at, I think that's University of Michigan, which is not to be mistaken. No, sorry, I changed the video. So this video talks the difference between like subliminal messages and subliminal, I can't remember the next term, but it distinguishes the difference between like the phenomena of like how people try to convince you that you can be brainwashed of sorts into what actually works in real life.
In 1957, an advertising executive from New Jersey announced that he had convinced moviegoers at a local theater to buy more popcorn using subliminal messaging. He claimed that 45,000 moviegoers were exposed to flashes of the words "eat popcorn" and "drink Coca-Cola" on screen during a movie, with the words appearing and disappearing so quickly that viewers weren't even aware they were there. And as a result, popcorn sales increased an average of 57.5%, and Coke sales increased 18.1%. He got a lot of attention for this supposedly scientific test because those numbers are huge. It was every advertiser's perfect fantasy and every consumer's worst nightmare. The idea that we could be constantly influenced by messages we don't even realize we're getting freaked people out. Except the whole thing was a hoax. It turned out that there hadn't been an increase in popcorn or Coke sales at the theater in question. And according to the theater manager, there hadn't been an experiment at all. But that hasn't stopped us from believing in the power of subliminal messages. Surveys from 1983, 1994, and 2004 show that about 3/4 of people who are familiar with subliminal messaging believe that companies use it. And a majority of those people think that it works. Thankfully, research does not agree. Subliminal perception is for sure a thing. We definitely can react to a stimulus even when we can't consciously perceive it, which is different from superliminal perception, things that we do consciously perceive even if we don't pay direct attention to them, like product placement. The line in between those two is known as the subjective threshold. Then below that, there's the objective threshold, the level at which we don't perceive or react to the thing. Subliminal perception research dates back to a book published in 1898, when a psychologist was looking to confirm the idea of a so-called sub-waking self. In a few experiments, he asked about 24 participants to read numbers or letters on cards, but he held the cards so far away that they could only see a blur or small dot. When forced to choose, participants could usually distinguish between numbers and letters. They got it right about 2/3 of the time, and they actually did better than chance at guessing exactly what was on each card, all of which suggested that they were perceiving the images on some level, even though they thought they were just guessing. A 1951 study in the journal Psychological Review found even clearer evidence by conditioning people to associate certain nonsense words with an electric shock. Later, when the words were shown to them too briefly to be consciously seen, the researchers measured greater electrodermal activity for words associated with the shock. That's a slight change in how well skin conducts electricity, which is associated with sweating. In other words, even though subjects believed they hadn't seen anything, their bodies still anticipated the jolt. So we know subliminal perception is real, but subliminal advertising doesn't really work. Researchers have done plenty of studies, but no one seems to be able to show any real change in consumer behavior in response to subliminal ads. For instance, a 1975 study in the journal Perceptual and Motor Skills flashed the words "Hershey's chocolate" over a movie. But the researchers found that none of the 33 subjects given the message bought Hershey's in the 10 days after the exposure. There's one exception, though. A subliminal message can sort of work, but only if you're already motivated to follow it. A 2002 study of 81 undergraduates found that they did drink more water when subliminally primed with words like dry and thirsty, but if and only if they were already thirsty. If they weren't, The hidden messages didn't do anything. In a follow-up experiment in the same study, 35 undergraduates were asked to pick between sports drinks described as thirst quenching or electrolyte restoring. They were only more likely to prefer the thirst quenching drink if they were subliminally primed with thirst-related words and were already thirsty. So subliminal messages aren't going to make you do things you don't want to, but they might nudge you gently in a direction you're already headed. It makes sense that subliminal messaging wouldn't drastically impact your behavior. The message is so subtle that it only has a subtle effect, which is good because subliminal advertising isn't technically illegal in the US. While Australia and the UK have laws against it, the US doesn't forbid advertisers or networks from using it. That said, a 1979 Supreme Court case ruled that it isn't protected by the First Amendment. And the Federal Communications Commission's official stance is that it's misleading and shouldn't be used. And they reserve the right to yank the broadcasting license of anyone who does. So nobody likes subliminal advertising. There just hasn't been that much effort put into stopping it, probably because in the end, it isn't that useful. Advertisers don't really care about sneakily targeting people who are already motivated to buy their stuff. They'd rather invest in snagging new customers. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow Psych. If you want to learn about ways your mind can actually be hacked into buying things, check out our episode on how restaurants trick you into spending.
Okay, so here we learned that like subliminal messaging and kind of exists on some realm in the sense that you can be convinced to respond in a very specific way, but not by doing things like flashing lights or there was another study and it had to do with like when people originally started washing dishes, they would use things like lemons. And so a lemon scent had been applied to dishwashing liquid to help encourage the interpretation that your dishes would be cleaner if you use lemon scented cleaners. And so essentially that's what marketing people did. They put lemon scent in certain things and it gives you the perception of clean, just like the sense of there's certain smells that you associate with like hospitals. Like there's a subliminal messaging that's associated with like stoic cleanliness, which is why like the first set of hand sanitizers would smell very medicated because it gives you the perception of it being more effective than others. And that leads down a rabbit hole of like, what is the placebo effect? So maybe it does actually work better because you think it works better, which is a whole other conversation. All right, so going into, I'm actually gonna skip by this and go into perception. Again, because this part of this lesson, this part of this lecture is very again, the foundations are in biology. These are things that you would have done in your academic past or should have done in your academic past. And I'm actually going to put you in teams in order to complete these tasks. So going straight to perception. So as I previously indicated, sensation is your body just interpreting data from the world, and perception is your body, your brain interpreting what exactly that data actually means. And so there are levels of perception. These are really good. These are easier to understand if you're an artist or if you are interested in interpreting art. Understanding perception is incredibly useful if you try to see how you can create things. For example, as we talked about perceptual organization, you can see from this figure here, there are different ways that you can shape perception. So there's a figures ground one, which is kind of like your basic use of camouflage. It's a concept. So certain animals are created a specific way to camouflage with their environment. The concept of like certain types of military camouflage, these are the concepts that those things are based on. So when we're talking about proximity, when objects are close to one another, we tend to perceive them as being together rather than separate, right? Most people tend to perceive these, like, look at the 7 lines here. It looks like 3 pairs and one that's all by itself. That is perception, because essentially these are just lines, but our minds automatically group them as ones that are together and then one that is separate. Looking at similarity, the objects that are similar in size, color, shape usually are interpreted as being a part of some sort of pattern or some sort of set. So you can see this pattern here. It's like squares, circles, squares, circles, squares, circles, squares. And then this one, you can kind of see like a cluster of squares, a cluster of squares, a cluster of squares, a cluster of squares, and then a T in circles. The similarity is how, so we perceive some sort of pattern to exist. And the pattern, and arguably the pattern does exist because of this clustering. Closure, look at these brackets. This looks like the beginning and end of something, beginning and end of something. These two are side by side, but our brain automatically interprets this as a beginning and a sort of end, all right? And then continuity. So items that continue on a pattern or direction tend to be grouped together as a part of a pattern. This kind of looks like waves, like a wavelength, or the way that a wave would cover some sort of like a bridge, whereas this just kind of looks like a standing bridge. Does that make sense? All right. Even though these are like just 2 separate lines which exist. This is a set of lines. This is a wavy line, and these are lines with humps. Lines with humps. But the way that we've assembled them gives some sort of interpretation of like what's actually happening. And this works very well in things like illustrations. If you wanted to draw a bridge, you do this. Or have you guys remembered, I say remember, but you might not know. You remember this thing? I hope you can see it. I'm going to attempt to draw this thing. No, go back. Go back. Why? Please go back. Okay, apparently I can't draw. It won't. What is happening? I'm gonna try this again because it kept kicking me out. I want to, if I can't draw it, then I'll just move on. So I'm going to draw and let's see what happens. Nope, okay. Can you guys see this back and forth thing that's happening? Okay, I'm no longer notating. Please go away, please go away. Okay, that's not happening. All right. All right, so perceptual consistencies, things that impact our perception. So we look at size, we look at shape, we look at color, we look at brightness. Again, distance and depth, something that works really well in drawings. When we look at this image, our brain automatically says the king of clubs is closer than the king of spades. It is how this is illustrated in order to create that illusion. This depends heavily on the concept of perception, all right? Okay. So we kind of covered all of this with visual illusions, optical illusions. On that note, I am actually going to stop sharing and place you in your group. So, sorry, actually, let me show you. Let's go back to this. So, like I said, I'm going to place you in your groups. One group, or sorry, 2 separate groups will be responsible for vision. Your learning activity for today is similar to the one that you've done before. You're going to be creating a slide because I love the idea of the infograph. Can you stay in previous groups? No, I'm just gonna no. It's because the groups are smaller. So yes, in theory, but no, like Zoom just gonna pick your groups at this point. Because I'm just gonna put you in 6 separate groups. You're going to create kind of like a basic slide presentation, a graphic presentation. So it's the intersection of an infograph and a slide presentation, which means it needs to be really, really heavy on the graphics. It also needs to cover each of the objectives which exists for your topic. Yes, Regina.
Are we having the same groups we have now, or are you doing a completely new group?
Zoom is going to pick your groups.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I'm gonna click a button, and where you live that will be your group. Sorry.
Okay.
All right. Yes, Alicia.
I'm sorry, I have to beg. Can we stay in the same groups, please?
Again,
Please, please.
it's gonna be six.
Please,
Like,
please,
so that's not even statistically possible because there are only 3 topics. I do not want to make groups bigger. In fact, your groups were too big in the first place. And my issue with group projects is somebody always isn't carrying their weight. And with a smaller group, we'll be able to see who is dropping ball, essentially. So minimally, even if you had the same group, those groups would be split in half.
Okay, because our group right now, we have 5 people.
See?
Hoping you would have let us stay in our group.
No, because there was a group, you had a group of 5 people, but there was a group of 7. See the problem? And I
See, we could totally take that, no problem.
But split in half. Split in half. Because I know for a fact, based on some of those assignments, I know not everybody pulled their weights. I know when everybody is putting in and not everybody put in. Go on. Yeah.
So what about this one then?
Mm-hmm.
What if those who opt to change their groups could maybe like private message you on Zoom? Mm-hmm. And like for us who have 5, like I feel like although I'm speaking for my group right now, I'm sorry guys, we would happily take on one more person to make the 6. You could decide that random person, but like for those who wanted to change groups, you could probably change them around. Please, this is the fast psychology. Like we should stay in the same group.
It's not enough content because it's so short. It's not enough content to justify 6 people being in one group. It's not enough content. Like for a vision, there are 2 objectives. I set this ball really, really low, which means if there are 2 objectives and all of the work can be done by, let's say, 1 person, maybe 2 people, I would have failed 4 people in being able to participate in this assignment. Because I get it. You guys are thinking about this from like a very strategic perspective, like who can do what? We can get this done really fast. My objective is that everybody gets to participate in the learning activity. So I feel you are seeing, but I need to know that everybody's doing a thing. Otherwise, you just did this thing for a grade. And while that makes you happy, knowing that everybody didn't learn from this process does not make me happy. Because when you get this test, because like, again, it's something that everybody gets to explore individually. And the less work that you do, the more you actually have to like go back and study for yourself. So the question is like, do you want to give yourself this disservice of not doing the thing because you just wanted the grade and then set yourself up for a fail in this test because you have to study harder to understand what you didn't do the first time? That's the question. Trying to help you all help yourself. You see what I'm saying? Like I know, I feel you. Like I feel you. I know what the strategy is, but my learning activity strategy is like, if you do the work now, then you don't have to read this very, very boring chapter, which is so incredibly boring. Like I know it's boring, which is why I tried to turn it into an activity where like, at least if you do it while assembling a thing, multi-sensory stimulations happening and something's gonna stick. It's gonna stick better than if you had to read through this chapter, which is boring. I know it. And I know some of y'all ain't read. I know it. See, this is me respecting y'all for who you are. I feel you and y'all are seen. See?
Thank you.
I feel you. See? Low hanging fruit here. But I also want you to create, like, the reason I have you guys creating like a visual slideshow of this information is, again, the purpose is to be able to share it amongst each other. And so, like, even though you have the words on this slide, if you have like a visual association with it, it'll help you. So when you're studying, you could scroll through this and maybe something will stick versus like all the words that are on this page. I'm trying to help you help yourselves. I promise. My goal is not to sabotage. I don't like how my lipstick looks very smudged on this image. I look like the Joker. My lipstick is not actually smudged. Sorry. That's a complete sidebar. What I will do, this is what I'm gonna do. I will let I'll let you pick your teams of 3. How about that? That's a compromise. Wait, but your teams only have like, how many people are in this room? I see 24 people on Zoom. That means it's 23 of you. Unless, who is it that always has 2 screens on?
I only have one today.
Okay, see, you know who you are. So there's 23, Riche, there you go. 23 of you in this space. That is approximately 5 groups of, I know math, 4 and 1 group of 3. Yes, 5 groups of 4, 1 group. See, it wasn't even 4, it was 5. Then you just hurt somebody's feelings. So do you want to tell me who your groups are, or do you want me to let Zoom do it?
What was the number again, please?
4. There's 5 groups of 4, 1 group of 3. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Did I stop sharing? Zoom it is. Okay. All right. Breakout rooms. 6.
No, I type in.
Oh, where you typing? Where you typing? Where you typing? Okay. Oh, you typing in the chat?
I was typing the names of my group people.
Okay. So wait. So I'm gonna make the 6 rooms. I'm gonna put let participants choose room. Please, please, please don't go with no group that don't want you. I'm just saying. So 4 groups. If you know, I don't know. I'll make the 6 groups. And tell you what, I'll make a team leader for each group and then we go from there. Y'all always trying to stress me. Okay.
We appreciate you for seeing us where we are. We appreciate you.
Okay, so who do I have as team leaders? People who know you can pull your team together, or you just want to make sure you have a place to go. Give me some names.
I put mine in the chat.
Okay. Oh, wait. Okay, chat. Yes. So. Okay, this is a lot of people. Okay. Okay. Manually assign. I'm manually assigning. Okay. Okay. Just slime me and whoever missing a person. For Jesus' sake, Steve. Okay. I am assigning Alicia, Destiny, Adria, and Regina. All right. Boom, y'all are in one room. Who else? This one is Steve's group. Who's in this group with Steve? Okay, so everybody else just will be randomly assigned. Sounds great. I don't want to hear no slapping up. Okay, assign for, okay, boom, that room's done. This room's done. This room's done. This one's done. And, oh, Austin, I might have failed you. How come this math is not mathing? Why did these numbers not add up? Do I have any place twice? I'm gonna delete this room. Where did I go wrong? 24. Did somebody leave? Somebody left, didn't they? Okay. Austin and Tennille, y'all are group unto yourselves. No, I'm gonna split this last group. What? Did somebody just Tamar, are you playing with my emotions? Boom. All of the people are here.
No, that wasn't me. That wasn't me.
Okay, somebody was doing something. Everybody has a room. 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 Okay. Everybody's in a room. Room 1. Vision. Room 2. Hearing. Room 2. Alicia, why are you still here? Did I not assign you? Room 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hi, can you put me into room 1, please? My internet was freaking out.
Oh, because I was like, why are you here? Okay.
Yeah, my internet.
Okay. I
So-
really just came here to make sure you guys saw what your topic is.
No, I didn't get
No.
It's
You
vision.
said it's vision, right?
Yeah. So it is slides. Let me see. The rubric is on the thing. It is slides 14 through 8. And there's a video. You guys have a video there too. So slides 14 through 8 is what
Are
belongs.
we allowed to share the screen?
No, it doesn't let you share screen because Zoom is difficult.
Okay.
All right. I'm bouncing around. Peace out.
And this you next class, right, Miss Bean Sanders?
Ooh, Miss Tiffany is fine. Sorry, that's a lot of last names.
I didn't know which one to call you. You said Sanders in brackets.
Miss Tiffany's fine. That goes with me everywhere. I'm fine with Miss Tiffany. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Send me a message if you.
So is this due next class?
Yeah,
or
at the top
tonight?
of next class. Not tonight. Ooh, not tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Lead meeting. Wait, where am I going? No. Oh, I can assign a host now. Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait, I'm not leaving minute. Never mind. Sorry. Leave room. Leave breakout room. Sorry. Breakout rooms. Breakout rooms. What? Alicia, where you supposed to be?
You can put me back. Please. Sorry. I ain't even talking no Miss Sanders.
Oh no. What?
Like nobody's saying anything. I'm so confused.
They're just okay. That's interesting. Wait, it says I sent you there.
You did send me them. Mm-hmm.
It's
In room 4.
I can't. Okay, it won't let me send you. It just says you haven't
Okay,
joined.
how do I?
Can you just jump
Okay,
in?
never mind. I see how to join.
Okay.
Mhm. So I have a question.
Yo.
This is due at the beginning of next class.
Yeah. You have most of the
So-
slides. Like you have the basic information. You have a video. You're just putting images up in a slideshow.
Okay, so in the event that my group doesn't do anything because, like I said, nobody is saying anything, then I guess just do it by myself.
Exactly. Do it by yourself and turn it in with nobody else's
Okay,
name on
thank
it. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't want you carrying.
thanks.
No problem. Oh Lord, that from.
You saying something?
Yeah, I was like, I don't want you carrying a team.
Okay, yeah.
All right,
All right, thanks.
no problem. Getting into these rooms is taking a very long time. Sorry. I just wanted to confirm that everybody knew what they were doing, right?
We're doing the herring
Correct.
section.
Excellent. Okay. Just wanted to check in, make sure you were on board. Great.
Yes,
Any questions for me? You don't have to be pressured to make up a question.
Did you have a specific amount of slides that you wanted, or you just wanted us to just explain through images
You just
about
need
the
to cover,
hearing process?
you need to cover the objectives. So I think there were like 3 or 4 objectives. Make sure that they are all covered, make sure that they are all labeled. You have information on them and you have an image to match it.
Okay.
All right. All right. I'm going to the next room. Leave breakout room.
Hello.
Hi, people.
Hello.
I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what topic they were covering.
Yes, for the so what exactly, like, just to clarify, like, what exactly we doing?
You're creating a slideshow. It must reflect each of the objectives for your topic. So this is room 3. So you are doing taste and smell, I think. Taste and smell. And so you need to make sure all of the content covers the objectives that encompass taste and smell. And you have to have them labeled. You have most of the word content between your textbook and the slides, and you need to find accompanying images to go with them.
Yes, well.
All right, got it? All right, this is due next class. I'm gonna join another breakout room because I am being requested.
Yes, well.
Zoom is taking its sweet time to get me between these rooms. I'm very sorry. What's up? Daria?
We were wondering if you can help us understand what the assignment is clearly, please.
Okay, so you have objectives that are very specific to your topic, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's hearing and What did I say?
Taste and smell.
Taste and smell. Right. So you're looking at the objectives that are specific to taste and smell, and you are creating a slideshow to make sure all of that content is covered in a slideshow. So for example, let me share my screen right quick. That's vision. So right here, where it says taste and smell, objectives 3.8, describe the olfactory system and the ways that give rise to smell. Like that should be in your, that's the same thing. Objective 3.9, describe how stimuli gives rise to taste. We should see that. You need a slide that explains the difference between no, see, that's pretty much it. That's it. You have those two. You need slides that explain these things. You have a video that's here. And I need to see, and it's an explanation. So it's not just like words, and we need to see accompanying images. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're doing something that's similar to here. Only thing, you're going to explain it a little bit more, and you're going to have images to accompany it.
Okay.
All right.
And this is due next class?
Yeah, next class.
Oh, okay.
All right. All right, I'm jumping to my last two groups because I haven't seen them yet. Leave break. Hello, people.
Hello.
Excellent. How are we doing? Does everybody understand the assignment?
For me, I do.
Can you spit it one more time, please?
Okay, so let me share my screen right quick. All right, this is group what, 5. So you are doing hearing, blah, blah, blah. All right.
Okay.
So these are the slides associated with hearing and balance. You have, so what you're going to do is create a slide presentation that explains all of your objectives. Explain the characteristics of sound waves and their effect on the sensation we call sound. You have, that's continued here. Describe the path that information about sound travels from your ears to your brain. You have explained the pace, theory, frequency, and volley principle, discuss damage to sense of hearing. And you have, well, and that's it. So you have what, 3 objectives. You need to create a slideshow that explains each one of those, but also using lots of videos. I've given you, I'm sorry, also using lots of images. So images need to be very present on the slides that you create. But I've also given you like another video to help prompt you to explain a couple of things. So whereas you have a slideshow here that just has like the very basic experience of sound, depends on physical properties, that's not like a full explanation. So you're going to explain sound waves and their effect. You can just write a couple of bullet points, but I want an image that goes with it. So like you can Google sound wave images, boom, and put that into your slideshow, and then you discuss it in depth. And that is your assignment. Does that make sense? 50% of the work has been done for you. Your book goes into detail about this. So the amalgamation of these resources makes you successful at this assignment. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to pop into my last group.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me know if you need anything. Okay. And we break out. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Excellent. Okay. I mean, sorry, based on your sound, I wasn't sure what to make of what was happening in this group. Everybody good? We understand the assignment. We're working.
No, negative. So we're making slides on our topic is vision. I think it's due, we said it's due next class, at the beginning of the next class. How many slides?
That's completely
Or
up to
deciding
you.
that?
You just need to make sure your outcomes are covered, the objectives are covered. I think there are only 2 for vision. So it's kind of low hanging fruit.
Okay,
Let me share my screen right quick.
thank you.
Where did it go? Oh, here we go. Okay, so vision. Your objectives are describe the parts of the eye. Boom. Explain the causes of after images, how dark and light adaptation affects your vision. Boom. Your book explains all of this to you. Otherwise, you might need to Google it to find out how all of these things happen. And then you need to have images on your slide. So each one of these things here must be explained in your slide, and you should have a wonderful image to go with it. I've helped you by giving you a nice little video to explain these things to you in the event that you are bereft of textbook, which is not my monkey, not my circus. I'm just trying to help you out. But these are things, think of these as questions that you need to answer in your slideshow. So I can't tell you how many slides you should have, but each of these should be covered. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have like 8 slides, right? But you only have 1, 2. You only have 2 objectives. So describe the parts of the eye. Explain the causes of after images, how dark and light adaptation affects our image, how energy is converted to messages in the brain. And you need to explain, you need to be able to distinguish, explain the difference between hue, saturation, and brightness, and additive, subtractive color mixing. Explain 2 major themes of color perception. Again, it's in your textbook. You have notes here that generally explain it. You have the internet to help you explain it. You're going to create a slideshow that explains all of those things in detail for me. With pictures, graphics being the most important aspect of it.
Graphics is important. Are we presenting it right, or are we just sending it?
You're just turning it in. It's going to be for a written assignment.
Okay, thank you.
No
Crystal clear now.
Excellent. All right. I will be in the waiting room if anybody needs me. Just send an SOS. Okay. I just made a suggestion. I mean, you know, do what you want with it, but in the future, like it doesn't have to be for this class, but in the future, consider sharing your wealth with other people. So I'm glad that went well, or at least moderately well, or relatively well. You will be, and I cannot state this enough, you will be underserved by not having the textbook for this class. And I know some of you are like, it's midterm, I made it this far. But one of the reasons when I give you an assignment, you are completely clueless is because you don't have the textbook and you are hoping to just like ride on the curtail of these course notes. And if that's working for you, I wish you all the best. But you are putting yourself at a disadvantage, and that is just a reality. I'm not gonna apologize for that. That's just the reality. All right. So this assignment is due at the top of class, Next class, like I said, it is due for a writing grade. And I think at that point, we will have a great balance of like, you would have had an oral assignment, 2 written assignments, a test, and then you'll have another test. So I think we're all caught up with grades so that, wait, am I supposed to post? There are no midterm grades, right? I don't think so. Anyway, but Moodle's up to date so that you can see what your grades are so far. So nobody's kind of like in the lurch about where they land in this class. The last assignment that you did on Google Classroom, some of you opted not to do that. Cool, and I respect your desire to not complete assignments, and I will meet that with a 0 grade, because that's how respect works. Other than that, any questions, comments, concerns about this chapter that you have? We have 3 minutes before the end of this class. No, we good? Excellent. So next week we are going to be reading up on chapter 4, which is it's chapter 4. So just look, your syllabus has exactly what the topic is. I do not know it on the top of my head. That being said, if we have no questions or feedback, I will end this class. Question, just random question. So I'm running a youth program called, it's a youth saloon. You learn about gender-based violence and you create a program to implement gender-based violence intervention or in your own community. If any of you are interested in forming a small team and are interested in doing that, you have a modest budget to implement the program. If that's something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. You go through a bit of, you learn a little bit about gender-based violence, and I walk you through the steps of creating a program, and then you launch it, all right? That being said, I have another team that's launching a podcast called No Slapping Up, and it is supposed to premiere this Saturday. I will send out it should have gone out on UB's channels, but I will send out a message to you guys if any of you are interested in watching. All right, that being said, atutala. I will see you on Monday. Monday. I didn't know it today. All right, so I'll see you guys on Monday. Bye.
Okay, good night.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.